Welcome to Paw Print Academy, your blueprint to raising better dogs. My name is Ryan, and I'll be your host for this journey. I've got my trusty co-host here, Brianna.
Hello.
And together we're bringing you real-world training insights built on leadership, structure, and proven methods. We record this podcast with live clients on the line in one take with live, unscripted questions and answers. At the end of the day, this podcast is a lot more than just teaching your dog to sit or stay. It's about building trust, creating calmness, and becoming the kind of leader your dog truly needs. We do that with our 3-pillar method of trust, obey, and perform. Together, we'll show you how these 3 pillars shape every step of training. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Hey there, episode 28, Leash Reactivity, Reading Body Language and Correcting Early. Tonight, we're going to talk about one of the number one things that we get phone calls on.
Yeah.
And it can be frustrating, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to work through it. Tonight, the main event.
The main attraction.
The main attraction. Leash reactivity is predictable. It's not random, and it builds through missed signals, late timing, unclear leadership, but it's really fixed by reading the dog early and intervening before we get to escalation.
Yeah, I always compare it to like a volcano, right? It's like the eruption. If it's already like erupted and the lava is out, you're behind the track.
Yeah. I need you to keep talking for a minute.
Oh yeah. He said you did not say enough right there.
Right. Let me fix something here.
Yeah. You're fine. So it is one of the number one things that we get calls about, right? Because inevitably the situation is you're out on a walk with your dog, and this is the number one leash reactive like situation that we get. And it always comes down to, I walk my dog in my neighborhood or down my street or around the block, and they're barking at other dogs or they're barking at people, and I don't know whether it's aggressive or whether they just want to play. And that's always kind of the call we get when it comes to leash reactivity is the number one thing. And I mean, it can be a super frustrating situation for owners. It can be super frustrating for the dog, right? Because it becomes such a strongly instilled pattern of, cool, we go out on a leash, we walk for a little bit, and then we see a dog and we blow up. And a lot of times it can be scary for owners because depending on you and depending on your dog, a lot of times the dog feels like it's going to overpower you. It also depends on what you're walking your own dog on. If it's a harness and they start pulling and they're barking and lunging at another dog, it can definitely be frightening for some people because a lot of your typical everyday dog owners don't know how to read the body language of a dog to figure out whether they're aggressive, they're excited, they're friendly, they're not. And it becomes just this emotional wave that they go on with their dog, walk after walk after walk. And it develops into such a strongly built pattern that they're always so frustrated and worried when they call that they're like, I need to solve this now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is a concept and this is a situation that has so many little nuanced variables to it.
Oh yeah.
That when you try to look up leash reactivity on YouTube and you just start watching videos, you could probably watch like 100 videos on it and get a lot of the same information, but also just all these
Yeah.
little different nuances and different things. Oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. It's like reading diet books.
Yeah.
It's like, well, don't do that. You're
Yep.
going to die.
Right.
And then this
It's
one's
like
like,
eat no carbs
right.
with this one, and then with this one,
Yes.
we're eating only carbs.
Right.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
So we try to take a different approach.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of us just telling you, we are going to tell you, we're going to have this conversation in real time about kind of the best practices. But one thing that I think is really important to talk about is that every single dog is different.
Mm-hmm.
And why they're doing it and how they're doing it and a lot of things, when you get into reactivity, it's highly likely that you might need some professional help.
Right, because at that point, you're looking at like dog psychology. You're not just looking at like, hey, I want to teach my dog how to sit down.
Right.
At that point, you've like surpassed that instance, and you're looking at how a dog's brain really works and what is triggering that emotion. Because at the end of the day, emotions are what drive reactivity. And if you're not addressing the emotions behind it and the mindset behind it, then you're just going to be in this revolving cycle of my dog blew up, my dog blew up, my dog blew up. And eventually, a lot of times the owner is like, well, eventually, like, I blew up, because it's just so frustrating.
Right. And we have really taken we've always taken the path of really trying to work ourselves out of a job and also really trying to provide either the least, I guess the least expensive routes for people, right? So a lot of times we're like, oh, here's some free advice. Here, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. There are probably like 3 major issues that I no longer recommend people kind of work through on their own, at least without getting some sort of eyes on the problem, because you can chase this problem for a long time.
Yeah.
And so those 3 things are reactivity towards dogs, and usually that's on a leash, but it can branch off. Sometimes the dog is reactive because they're on the leash, but if they're not on the leash, they're fine. Sometimes they're reactive to dogs, but only near the house and not like in a park or a neutral location. So there's a lot of nuances that go into that. So one is reactivity towards dogs. Number 2 is aggression.
Yeah.
Aggression, just in general, it's so nuanced.
Yeah.
The third thing is resource guarding.
Yeah.
Once again, we have worked with clients trying to help them to work through it themselves, and almost always you will chase your tail.
Right, because like I said, right, at that point,
there's-
you need to know something about dog psychology in order to know how to like combat and like reverse those behaviors. It's not, I teach my dog like these little things that build up to the fact that like that will just stop. The dog really has to go through, and I mean, I think those types of things are considered like behavior modifications, right? Because you are modifying a dog's behavior towards a certain stimulus.
Yeah.
And at that point, if you haven't like dove into like why a dog even starts to think that way, then you're never going to get around it. Because if a dog is barking and lunging at another dog and you're just like, sit, you're not doing yourself any favors, and you're not doing that dog any favors either.
Right. And so many people will get that advice from YouTube. Oh, you just tell
Right,
them what
just
to
give
do.
them obedience
Give them,
commands.
and let obedience
Yeah.
like take over. And that is the answer eventually, but you have
Yeah.
to break through a couple of levels,
Yep.
right? The number one thing that I really want to provide actionable like concepts here. And so I created something to help you solve this, right? I created the Paw Print Academy app. And this is a shameless plug for sure. But the logging features on this app are second to none. Specifically, the behavior logs the behavior journal, and the reactivity logging feature. This at least helps you get an idea of what really is going on, right? So when something happens, like your dog like just loses it on another dog, like on the walk, you can actually now log the whole picture. So it's not just he reacted, my dog reacted today. That's not what we're talking about. What I'm talking about is using an ABC approach, right? This is the same exact way that like a professional behaviorist uses, right? Antecedent, behavior, and consequence. Antecedent is a great big word for what happened directly before this event.
Yeah.
Then the behavior of what the dog did, and then finally the consequence. So what ended up happening to the dog, right? So you were 20 feet away, right? 20 feet away from the dog. He lunged, he barked. I redirected, we moved away. That's an example, right? That's your antecedent, your behavior, your consequence, all in one quick entry. Additionally, you're able to put in the distance. You're able to put in the time it took your dog to recover. You're able to put all of these things in. So now the app takes that and it tracks it. And as you start to do this and you start to log it, you can keep track and you can figure out, hey, my dog is reactive at about 25 feet. Not my dog is reactive to dogs. Oh, my dog is reactive, but recovers within this amount of time.
Yeah.
Maybe it takes 30 seconds to recover. But then as you're working on it, now it only takes 10 seconds to recover. If you weren't keeping track of this, you would think you weren't making progress, but you might be. And now that logging keeps track of that. You get graphs and you get graphics and you get all of these things so you can actually see your progress. Additionally, you've got AI models that are tracking all this and actually giving you actionable advice after every log that you put in, telling you what to do next, where you're at and what to do. That is, I don't care if it sounds like a commercial. This is the way forward for people that don't know what to do to fix this problem. Because I can sit here and we're going to talk about it here in a minute. But if you're not keeping track, I'm sorry, before I jump up ahead, we're going to talk about these best practices for you to do. But do they apply to your dog? Are they working? Are they not working? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? You will only know that if you're keeping track. And so I highly, highly recommend that you get into the app and you start keeping track of it.
Right. It's pretty similar to like anybody that's dealt with like kids or themselves with like allergies, right? If you go in for like problems, your doctor is going to start having you track everything that you eat, everything you drink, everything you take daily, everything that you come into contact with.
Absolutely.
And if you don't track it, you're never going to figure out what the allergy is related to, because you have to start cutting out or picking one thing at a time. And you have to focus on one thing at a time. If you make 12 changes, you're never going to know which change made the difference. And
inevitably, your memory is flawed.
Oh, yeah.
It's biased.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I don't remember
You're
anything.
like, well, that aside, right? Yeah, my memory is mush.
Yeah.
But that aside, you remember things with a certain bias to it. Or you remember things to what you were paying attention to.
Yep.
But when you log it and you're looking at the data does not lie.
Yeah.
Those data points, they stay there. And 6 months from now, a year from now, it doesn't matter the time. They're there. This is what happened. And now you have a truth that you can actually make actionable decisions on. That's why it's important. So there's my commercial for it. But honestly, it's free.
Yeah.
It's not even a paid function, right? You could go in there and you do it for free. So I'm not even making any money on this. This is the solution for people.
Yeah.
We just got to spread the word. Anyway, let's jump into it.
Okay.
All right. So it doesn't just start. The reactivity process does not start at the bark or the lunge. We're well before that.
Yep.
And that's what we have to start paying attention to, those subtle changes, little bits of posture, their focus, their breathing, panting. Where's the tongue at? Is the tongue in the mouth? Is it out of the mouth? Right? Very different body posture if the dog's tongue's hanging out of their mouth versus they pull their tongue in and close their mouth.
Yep.
Like that's a loading phase, right? That's like, or dogs close their mouth and then drops their head to sniff. They're like, oh, they're just interested in something on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, they're getting into a position where they're just looking, just sniffing, and that's when the lunge happens.
Yep.
So we need to start nailing down these common, like, early indicators. Ears locking forward, mouth closing, body stiffening, slow stalking movement, right? Intense staring or complete avoidance of,
Yeah.
right? That side eye, we call it's called whale eye. The disengaging from something and acting like they're very busy,
Yeah.
right? All of these things are behaviors that we need to zero in on and redirect before the blow up.
Right. And I think like the behavioral courses I've taken and like the knowledge I've gained is like you'll learn eventually, like once you work with a dog enough, like you start correcting like the mindset behind what they're thinking, right? Because you can see it in the dog. Dogs can't really hide their emotions very well. Some of them can every once in a while. I know I've worked with some dogs where they're like, no, I'm fine. No, I'm fine. And sometimes they're very good at hiding it, but that's very few dogs. Otherwise, you get a dog that's showing all of its emotion throughout its entire body if you're watching it closely enough and you know your dog well enough. But if you wait until the dog is showing the behavior, you're already behind the power curve. Like they've already been thinking for 30 minutes, or 30 seconds, like what they're going to do next. So if you don't catch it at the mindset, then you're not interrupting it at the right point.
Yeah. And so I've got one of the questions that I would typically ask a trainer. Why do you think most people only recognize reactivity once it becomes the kind of like loud and obvious? And
I mean, I think people just don't know, right? It's like we tell people all the time, you don't know what you don't know. If you don't know, we get it all the time, right? We are like, owners are like, oh, well, they're barking at other dogs, but they're wagging their tail.
Right.
All the time. That's the number one thing that we hear. But they're wagging their tail.
Is always a happy dog.
No, it's not. Right. But we don't know that because nobody actually taught people what it really means. I say it all the time. You have to take course after course and class after class to like adopt children. But nobody makes you learn anything before you go to a shelter and be like, I want that dog. It's cute.
Right.
And they don't
even speak English.
Right.
Ever. Their whole life.
And nobody in the shelter is like, well, this is a bull mastiff. So here's a little bit about the breed. Nope. Nobody. They're just like, yeah, it is cute. Here.
Right.
Give it a great home. And it's nobody's like, that's not to like talk crap on like shelters and things like that. Like I have a shelter dog. I got a shelter dog. I didn't know what kind of breed he was. I for sure was the owner that was like, well, he's really cute. He looks like my last dog. Not like my last dog. Spoiler alert. He's a wild man. But it's just you don't know what you don't know. And if nobody came up with like home economics in like middle school, would anybody be like, yeah, baby crying means like it needs food or like it's diaper changed or something? That's why they give you those fake babies where it's like figure it out. Figure out why it's crying.
Right.
Because you got to read it,
Love that. How much time do you think like a dog owner realistically has to intervene once the dog gets fixated?
How long?
Yeah.
Like a time frame?
What's your recommendation?
Oof. I'm a good so interrupt doesn't mean to like correct, right?
Right.
If I give a dog a good like 30 seconds to like feel them out, within 30 seconds, your dog is going to tell you what their intentions are. It's either, hey, I'm chill, or it starts going into like pushing forward towards the item that they're staring at.
Yeah.
Because no dog is going to wait more than 30 seconds to be like, yeah, I'm not going to do something or I am going to do something.
Right. This is tough.
But I'm not saying that you have to correct the dog. It's like, just say your dog's name. Do you see their ear twitch? Are they paying any attention to you, or are they so redlined already that they're just like, yeah, I don't hear anything going on behind me?
Yeah. I say there's two major phases that I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
One is the lock on,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then two is the progression.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So kind of what you just said, right?
Right.
At the moment where they're starting to posture towards,
Yeah.
right, directing energy,
Mm-hmm.
there's like a passive state of locked on
Yeah.
and an active state of locked on.
Mm-hmm.
The passive state, as long as you're dialed into it, we really don't want to correct
Right.
because they haven't done anything.
Yeah.
And it's okay for them to notice things.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So just because your dog's like zeroed in on something
Mm-hmm.
doesn't necessarily mean that you're interrupting that.
Yeah.
Now, you can intermittently interrupt that so that it doesn't get more spiraled out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times what we do with that is those are great times for us to go, yes, and then reward the dog back towards us.
Yep. Another great way to like test that is I'll always like put myself between the dog, my dog, and that stimulus, whatever it is that they're locked out on. And at that point, it's, well, is your dog willing to like go past you towards the stimulus? Because at that point, that's a pretty good sign that your dog's like, oh, hey, middle finger, go get out of my way. I'm going to go past you to figure out what this is. So I think those are some really good like options as well, is like you just have to gauge where your dog is at. But in order to do that, you really have to like study your dog, and you have to figure out your dog and know your dog and know what's normal for them and what's not. Earlier with Gabe, we were outside and it was like he was like shaking, but his tail wasn't tucked. It was like wagging, and he was like, what are we doing? What are we doing? But he was still shaking.
Right.
Like he was scared, or like somebody would think that he was scared.
Right. They're like, oh, he's just
He's just so terrified.
so terrified.
Right, but he's like running around the yard, tail wagging, looking at me, and he's like, "Yeah, well, are we gonna like train? What are we doing? Are we playing? Like, what do we do?"
But he was overstimulated.
But he
for
was,
sure.
he was just overstimulated. He was like, "There's a little girl riding a bike. There's a car coming towards me. The wind is blowing. We're in the front yard. This is weird." Like, all these things were going through his mind, and he just can't handle all of that emotion, and it comes out in his muscles.
Right. Yeah. Cool. So let's move on to the next supporting concept here.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that we try to frame the podcast out, right, is one, we identify some of the problems, and then two, we talk about how we can kind of prevent, right, that those issues, and what we need to be dialed into. And then finally, then that third phase, we come back and we really try to bring solutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's move into the second piece here, which is timing and distance are going to control our experience here. So distance is for sure the first tool. And then if the dog can't stay mentally available, you know you're too close.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to use distance as your friend. Push him back.
Yeah.
Think about it as a concert. You go to a concert, you're right by the stage, all the speakers are right there, and you're trying to give me the directions on how to use a blender. And I'm like, I've never seen a blender before, don't know what this contraption is. And you're trying to explain it to me right next to the stage. It's not going to go well. But if we walk 10, 15, 20 feet away, maybe further, I don't know how loud it is, then you can get your point across significantly easier.
Yeah.
with significantly less frustration on both parties.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same concept. The thing that is taking the dog's attention is the source of the noise.
Yeah.
And if you move away from that, you can get through.
Mm-hmm.
But staying right by it and then asking for those obedience tasks isn't probably going to work initially.
Right. I think one of the like most nightmarish things you could probably do for a dog that's reactive or you think is reactive or might be reactive is to have them get ready to walk by a dog and then you put them in a sit or a down. I mean, that just puts so much social and like emotional pressure on the dog that eventually you're going to get an eruption.
Because movement dissipates stress
Yeah.
in dogs.
Yeah.
And so you really want to incorporate movement.
Yeah.
Now, it's not bad to incorporate, use, and hold accountable a dog with some sort of obedience, but you also need to incorporate distance and the movement, which I'm going to give you the answer is where the heel comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
And is so important because you can still put your dog, this concept, well, put your dog in a sit, put your dog in a down, control the situation. You can do that, but you can do it with a heel while you're moving away, while you're rewarding your dog, while
Right,
you're
still
redirecting
moving,
them,
yeah.
while you're doing, you can put all this together. So I'm giving you the answer up front.
Right. And I
We'll
think
talk about that.
initially too, like the errors we run into is just dog owners, right? It's like you get your dog home and you go for a walk and you're inevitably a lot of the times in a neighborhood or at least on just like a residential street where you're walking down, another dog is coming. And even if you're on opposite sides of the road, you have no ability to give your dog more distance because what are you going to do? Walk into people's yards? And that's a tough situation to be in because you yourself have nowhere to kind of escape to.
Yeah. The best handlers are going to adjust early,
Yeah.
right? Being proactive,
Mhm.
seeing the dog coming and not crossing your fingers and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
Just being like, oh, I see what's about to happen here. Let me be responsible and adjust the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Then adjusting early can slowly turn to adjusting. You're always going to want to adjust early, but you can adjust with less and less and less distance.
Mm-hmm.
That's the goal. If you're tracking it, if you're keeping track.
Yeah.
So that's important. All right, let's talk about timing. So you can use a well-timed no if your no has value.
Mm-hmm.
That no might need to be accompanied by some other sort of adjunct, right? Some other sort of pressure or correction or something, depending on the dog.
Yeah.
And that's also depending on your leadership in the home. If your no is worth nothing because you say it all day long and never do anything, never follow it with anything, your dog's going to blow it off.
Mm-hmm.
So you already set yourself up for failure there.
Yeah.
But a well-timed no before the behavior peaks, it can give your dog kind of a chance to choose differently or just be like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Because they're like, they're watching me.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just there in their own heads, right? You're kind of snapping them out of there. And that no basically just works as a redirection.
Mm-hmm.
I guess timing, distance, I can save it for the next one, but I'm just going to jump into it. Inside turns.
Yeah. My fave.
Right.
Yeah.
Inside turn. So an outside turn is usually the most used with dogs.
Yeah.
And that's where the dog is on the outside of the turn.
Mm-hmm.
So you do an outside turn. That means your dog is on the outside of you, and you do a real quick little 180, and the dog has to speed up on the outside of the arc and do the 180, you turn, and then follow you.
Yeah.
Well, an inside turn is the opposite. That's where you are turning in front of them and literally breaking their pattern by breaking their gaze.
Yeah.
An inside turn has the advantage that they physically will have to break their eye fixation on that because you're going to step in front of them.
Yeah.
Even just for a second, but it's going to break it up. That can be really useful.
Mm-hmm. It's also the fact that like you're kind of like cutting the dog off at that point and like navigating where you want their head to go, which is to follow your leg. And with a dog, no matter what, where you have their head go, their body will follow. And that's the concept of like collars and leashes, right? Of harnesses not working as well as collars and things like that, because you have to control the head of the dog and point it and guide it where you want them to go. If you're guiding their body, they can still rotate their head wherever they want to.
Yeah.
And at that point, if they still want to engage with that other dog or that person or whatever it is, then they simply just turn their head while you're dragging them on a harness, which we see, especially with like the videos of dogs leaving dog parks. Like they're like dragging, but they're like looking back and they're like, no. And then the dog flops down and it's like this whole thing.
Pancake.
Yeah, pancake it down. So, yeah.
How do you determine the correct working distance for a reactive dog?
We do like the imaginary lines, right? We do either like a radius, or if you're having to walk like side by side or like past something, you just draw imaginary lines. And if you say I start like 30 feet away and draw like 5, not even 5 feet really. I mean, we sometimes have to break it down to like 1 foot or something like that, 6 inches. It's like, I don't know. But you essentially draw these imaginary lines where the item or I lost my word on the floor. Why are you laughing?
It's hard, isn't it?
No. The stimulus is the middle of the target. Say it's like the bullseye. And you're going to draw those lines just like you would see on a target outwards in a radius. And you essentially have to start far away, and you're feeding your dog in some sort of way, whether you're doing obedience or just feeding the dog, because essentially you just want to work your way in to where if your dog is no longer paying attention to you, they're not engaging, they're not eating anymore, you've now passed what we call the threshold of a dog's ability to disengage from something and stay engaged with you. So you've lost the ability to start to then teach the dog, and the dog is not going to be teachable in a moment where they can't engage or take food.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and to piggyback on that, what Brianna's talking about is really charting that dog's threshold, where they go over threshold. And you want to stay back far enough. So that's like getting closer to the stage, and at the point where you can no longer hear the other person, you've got to step back. Same concept. But we can check to see if they can hear you. We can check to see where the dog is on their threshold by offering them food. Scatter feeding, putting the food on the ground, whatever.
Yep.
Because their food drive is one of the first things to shut down, or really one of the last things to shut down right before they're like completely over a threshold. So that's a good marker. Additionally, the way that we determine the correct working distance is by charting where you have issues.
Yep.
And once again, back at it, right? The Paw Print Academy app will do that for you. So you can find that. It's totally free to do all of that functionality. All of your logging capabilities are totally free. And it's thepawprintacademy.com. Try it out. Work through it. If you're having reactivity with your dog, it's super frustrating. But if you work through the distance and you start keeping track, it will tell you exactly, hey, your distance is like 35 feet. You need to be 35 feet away. And you're like, oh, cool. So now you have an idea. I'll start at 50 feet and work my way in. And by the time you get closer to that 35-foot level, you know that you need to be hyper aware of what's going on. All right. Mistakes that handlers make when they try to just push through and flood the dog. So flooding is the concept of just ripping the Band-Aid off and being like, hey, you need to just figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't always work.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's a technique. There's some psychology behind it. Not highly recommended. Making your dog push through anything is likely to end with frustration unless you have a lot of education behind it.
Yeah.
Because it's too nuanced. So not going to recommend it. We're not even going to jump through that hoop, so to speak. And finally, distance management. The reason it's more effective than just corrections is because the corrections aren't always perfectly dialed in.
Yeah.
They're not always clear.
Right. And if you time them incorrectly, then your dog's going to start relating different things to those corrections based on what the dog is looking at, what they're actually reacting to. Like, what if you get wrong what your dog is even reacting to in that moment?
Yeah.
So different things like that where the dog is just going to see, like, the dog's perception is just different from yours.
Right.
So if you know what's going on with your dog and you're just like working through that exact situation, then yes, sometimes corrections are appropriate depending on what you're working on and what your dog knows. Right. If you've been working for a long time on like distance management and you've gotten right up to the point of like being close to that thing, and then your dog's like, well, I'm going to try it one more time. Something like that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. Maybe then we're teaching the dog with corrections.
Yeah.
But when you're playing with distance rather than corrections, you're learning about your dog in those moments.
And this is the crazy thing with corrections. They get such a bad name of like, oh, I can't believe you would correct your dog. Or, oh, are you using leash corrections or doing this or doing that? A lot of times they get a bad name just because they're done improperly. Bad timing, bad execution, and you don't...
Wrong equipment.
Wrong equipment. You're doing everything wrong. If you were to only... if you were to only in carpentry try to use a hammer for all of your screwdriver tasks, hammers would get a real bad name.
Right. And if you only
real
tell
bad reviews.
Your dog yes and you never tell your dog no, I don't know if anybody's ever seen Yes Man. I think it's is it Jim
Carrey?
Jim Carrey, yeah. He just has to say yes to like everything for a certain period of time. Eventually, like that mentally can wear on you. If it's just like yes, 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 any little thing where it's like, well, I should probably say no to that, you've created an unrealistic expectation in your dog now. It's like, why would you tell me no? You've always told me yes. And then you've got conflict with your dog because they've never heard the word no.
Right. Or you've never given it any like value.
Right. Any value. I think that's, yeah. I mean, a lot of people will always say no, 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 no. But
right.
yeah,
right.
If you've given it no value and then all of a sudden it's like, no, you really can't do that. And it's like, oh, well, I didn't know you meant it this time.
Yeah. All right, let's crush this. This is the third part. This is where we talk about solutions. Mm-hmm. So 1, sequence matters, right? You know gives the dog information, but actually doing something about it is something that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that correction could simply be that inside turn. Yeah. That correction could simply be you turning around and walking away. But something needs to happen.
Yeah.
You can't just tell your dog no, like pop them on a leash and continue towards the issue.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Next, when the dog does disengage, you've got to reward that. No matter how embarrassed you are, no matter how frustrated you are, no matter how emotional the event was, you have to reward your dog for doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And this one gets glazed over a lot of times because we do get frustrated. We're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just did that. Let's go. Come on, let's get out of here. And then the dog is kind of getting punished for doing the right thing, even though it wasn't done at first. I get that. But you still got to be fair about it.
Yeah.
This is a lot of times why owners kill or poison their own recall.
Yeah, for sure. Because, yeah, if you call your dog and call your dog and call your dog and they don't come back, and you call your dog and they come back and you're like, I'm still upset.
All right, get in the house, right? And you're all upset.
100%.
Next time,
you've
they're
broken
like,
the trust with that dog.
No.
Yeah.
He yells at me when I come back. So we've got to give them some praise, right? And it can be calm praise. It could just be good job. But use the marker words that you typically use.
Yeah.
Next, reactivity is going to improve when the dog understands the leash pressure and how it all works.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to do that completely separately.
Yep.
Completely separately from the actual reactivity events. So let's talk about the little science here behind the 5 steps that go into like solving reactivity, right? There are 5 distinct like steps that need to take place. So 1, you've got to diagnose the dog properly. You have to know what it is that they're having a problem with and why.
Yeah.
We could talk for probably 2 hours on all the variables of why. Don't have time right now. But number 1, that's the first step, is diagnosis. The second step is management. We have to prevent that process from happening. So we remove the dog from the event. We don't put the dog back in that position until we've done step 3.
Mm-hmm.
Step 3 is teaching the dog a different and or incompatible behavior. Ideally an incompatible behavior. For sure an other behavior, but definitely an incompatible behavior is best. For instance, heel. The dog can't run away from you and bark and lunge at a dog and heel at the same time.
Right. And when it comes down to that, I also want to mention, like, when you heel your dog, which is important if you deal with reactivity, like that position is really important. But also having your dog in a position on the opposite side of that trigger so that you can properly see, like, as soon as that dog crosses over or goes to cross over you, they've already passed where they should be allowed to be. So it clears up the communication of where you expect your dog and where they expect that they should be.
Yep. So we're on step 3.
Yep.
Right. Step 3 is teaching your dog an incompatible behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Now, step 4 is train that behavior and trigger it to, train that behavior and apply it to non-triggering events.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that the dog is reactive to another dog passing by. I then take my dog, I manage the situation, I diagnose that it's the dog passing by. I manage the situation, I stop taking my dog on walks temporarily. I teach the heel really, really well in the home. And then we go out to the park, and when the dog sees a bird, something that they don't react to, right? The dog sees a person, the dog sees a car, whatever it is, I give them heel. Mm-hmm. And so I start applying that cue to non-triggering events. Mm-hmm. And then finally, step 5 is where I finally, once I've really nailed that down and I've established value to that cue and that process, that prompt, then I go back and I start to introduce that concept of the dog, but at a sufficient distance to prevent the blow up. Mm-hmm. And then step 6, part B, right, is decrease the distance.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely.
Yeah.
That's the scientific 5-step process.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think going back to what I said, I think I kind of phrased that wrong because I'm like, your dog has to have a heel for reactivity, which is not necessarily true. But your dog should know how to walk next to you so that you can identify when they go to crossover. Does it need to be a formal heel? I don't necessarily think that it does. I've walked several dogs that have been reactive that didn't necessarily know heel, but knew how to walk next to me so that when they go to crossover, that's where I can offer the correction because we were walking on this side. Does it have to be an absolute command? No, not necessarily.
Yeah. Okay. I got a big question.
Okay.
Why is it critical to say no before applying any correction? I'm going to answer this one because the corrections, the concept of corrections here. Corrections can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So we're just going to lump all of them into together. Before you correct a dog's behavior in any way, you use no as a precursor so that it marks what is about to happen. This is the same concept as when we use a reward marker like yes or free or good or break or whatever words you use. I say yes, and then I give them a treat. I say yes, and then give them a treat. By doing that, it builds value in the yes. By using a correction, it could and a correction could be as simple as you stepping in front of the dog, or you turning and going away, or you taking something away that the dog finds valuable. Mm-hmm. Before that correction, you mark it with no, and that way, no has value. Mm-hmm. You've shown the dog. You said no, and then immediately after that, you followed it with something that changed the dog's situation. Yeah. That's how you establish value and accountability in dog training. Mm-hmm. All right. How do you reinforce calm behavior without overstimulating the dog? This one's tricky.
So a lot of times, unless we're dealing with kind of working at a distance and being still, we typically don't recommend a lot of food usage.
Right. And so that's why I was like, this is a good question to cover because we'll talk about both concepts here. And this is what we talked about right at the very beginning. Everything is different. Mm-hmm. But there are some dogs, like you can't treat a dog into not reacting.
Yeah.
And if you have a dog that's very highly food driven, a lot of times the food just makes them more stimulated. Mm-hmm. It's a stimulant. And so we treat because they're doing a good job and they're just ramped up out of their mind. Mm-hmm. They're more likely to react now.
Yeah. But then if it's like fear, you can also use food because it can be like you can magnet feed a dog like past items that they're kind of like scared of, but they know are there. So it really depends on like the type of reactivity, right? Because not all reactivity is the same.
Right.
And so you deal with kind of like fear-based reactivity a lot different than you do like aggressive like reactivity and things like that.
Right. Here is another little science tip.
2 for 1.
You cannot, allegedly, the science says that you cannot reinforce the dog's fear with reward.
Yeah.
So you can reinforce certain behavior traits that the dog does when they're fearful, but you can't actually reinforce the fear. Mm-hmm. And that's good news because that means that you can take a dog that is fearful and you can use food or something that's really positive and you can use it to help counter condition and desensitize the dog from that fear.
Right. But that is very much where like your thresholds will come into play.
Correct.
And it's like if your dog's not taking it, then they're not learning and you're not counter conditioning anymore. You're flooding.
Yep.
So that's where like the line comes in.
And if you are not confused by now,
Right. I know it's hard.
because we're like, but you could do this, but you could do that,
Right,
but you can do
Gabe's
this, but
a great
don't do this.
example. So last week we took him to group class and the wind was blowing and there were a lot of cars going by and he was like so scared.
Yeah.
Couldn't get him to like participate in any way. Put him back in the kennel, brought him back out like 10, 15 minutes later and he was like, yeah, I'm fine now. Let's like do some recall.
Right.
Let's run around. Let's do
Just
stuff.
had to reset.
You just have to reset. So sometimes it doesn't mean you have to entirely like leave a situation. Sometimes you can just put your dog away, reset your dog and yourself if you're like emotionally like tuned up at that point,
Yeah.
and then go back to it. Don't give up just because your dog blew up or your dog like shut down or whatever type of situation it is.
It's
Just
also
try
a
it again.
really great lesson for the dog to learn that they get put right back into the same situation.
Yeah.
Assuming that it didn't end in like a painful, scary, fearful
Right.
event,
Yeah.
right? But if it's just I was really uncomfortable, and you put them away in the car, and they calm down a little bit, and you get them out in 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and you put them right back in the same situation, and they're like, okay, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
This isn't so bad.
Yep.
And now they end up strengthening a different kind of version of that in their head.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was going to say, though, is if you are confused on this process, this is the reason why this is one of those 3 things that I usually, I do recommend that you just reach out for some help.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's just so many variables. And it's tough. It's tough. It's a frustrating subject. It's frustrating to nail down. If you are, we have a new catch-all email for the Paw Print Academy, and that one is just team, T-E-A-M, team, at thepawprintacademy.com. That is going to be our new email going forward. And if you've got a question or you need clarification or something we said, you're like, that's not right. I heard from my friend somewhere that said this. I'd love to talk to you about it. Send me an email. Until then, let's hit listener project. Oh, we didn't open it up for questions. Yeah. Right. Where's my sweet Jeopardy music here? No, come back. Nailed it. All right. Questions are open. I turned.
Hi, guys.
Hey,
Hi.
It's Lila
what's up, Lila?
and Reactive Pip.
And Reactive
Pippi.
Pip. Let's do
Yes.
it. What's up?
Well, I was going to ask this question, but I think you answered it. And so you have to tell me if I'm right.
Okay.
So it's kind of a question. If we've been using the app, well, it's kind of 2 questions. We've been using the app, and Pip is very reactive within 5 and 10 feet.
Okay.
Of other dogs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, dogs. Yeah. We can't talk about cats. That's a different species. We won't go there. Or cars. Outside of that, he will listen. Mostly. Not all the time. But I haven't plugged that into the app yet.
Okay.
So it could not be. And now I forgot where my words are on the floor.
Yeah. Right. That happens. It happens to me all the time.
That happens.
And I
to the
like
best
look
of
around.
us.
Right. I'll be just sitting in this chair, like looking down at the ground. And she's like, what are you looking for? My words. They're here somewhere.
So what happens if even within, like, you can't get past that 5 feet, inside 5 feet?
I mean, inside 5
Like,
feet's
yeah.
pretty dang close. Are they like playing with each other at that point?
Oh no, we're reacting. We're losing our minds. We're choking. We're jumping.
Okay. All right. So let's run this through, right, our scientific process, and let's come up with a plan right now. and move forward with that. So first step is we diagnose what is really going on. Does Pip react only in your like home space mostly, or have you tried the 5 and 10 feet in public areas? Like in other areas away from where he lives or where he perceives his domain to be?
I'm trying to think, like we go out places, but I really can't. No, it's out other places.
Okay. So if it's truly just a distance relation to dogs, then let's move forward with that. Let's say that is for sure what it is, and you can kind of modify this as you go, depending on as you learn more about it. So the next part is we remove him from the. We manage the situation. This does twofold. One, it stops the reinforcement process, because what he's doing, the more times that he has an opportunity to do it, the more natural it comes to him. Additionally, if we look at the concept of classical conditioning would say that he is getting so much of like a dopamine burst and a hormonal shift from lunging out and showing that he's this like big man, right, on the block.
Yeah.
And so we have to manage the situation so that one, he doesn't get to do that. That will slowly decrease that hormonal shift, so that similar to how someone who is actually drug addicted has to go to rehab and has to stay away from the substance or the issue that they were addicted to, for the neural pathways to slowly like break themselves down and no longer be as strong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so we need to replace it. We take that away so that can kind of die out naturally, and we replace it with something else. And we have to replace it with something else that hopefully we can equate to equal value. And what that means is, if lunging and blowing up at dogs is the thing that makes him feel the most alive and the most like satisfied and the most accomplished throughout his whole day, if that was you, wouldn't you look forward to that?
Right.
And so that's where management comes in. Management sections off the behavior so that it can die a natural death. Then we reinforce, bolster, and increase something that is good, that we do want, and that still meets his needs to feel satisfied. And we're only on step 2. But are you with me so far?
Yeah.
Cool. So we come up with one of those. What's something that he loves to do? What's something that like he just totally feels alive when you do it?
He loves his ping pong balls.
Okay, great.
Or his like poppers, yeah.
So we start getting creative with how we can do that in order to make that truly the pinnacle of his day.
Right.
Okay. All right. So now step 3 is we teach him a new behavior, and then we rep it out and we proof it completely in isolation, away from all those other things. Heel would be a great one for this.
Yes, we've been working on that.
Cool. So we get a static heel, then we get a dynamic heel. Mm-hmm. And we proof it, because when we're dealing with that reactivity in that really close proximity, you don't have a lot of extra time, right? honestly, you're in a position where a lot of owners were like, man, I wish I could get 5 to 10 feet away. Right. Like they're at like 50 or 75 feet where they're like, oh my gosh, my dog just freaks out from a big distance. They have less options than you do. But at the 5 or 10 feet, you don't have a lot of room to play with. So you've got to get this heel down like really well. Okay. So now we've trained a heel. We've given him something and we've taught him exactly where to be, and we have made it like excellent. Now we take him and we start putting him in other situations with things that he's not triggered by, not fully reactive. An example, like he's not reactive to people, right?
Right.
Cool. So as he walks up to someone, as you start to approach people and you take him on walks, if you see a dog, you just remove him from the situation. You still do the management and you create a big enough distance where he doesn't react. Okay. That's your management for right now. But when you approach people that don't have a dog, as he gets closer to the people, you put him in that heel.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So you start to rep and put the management strategy in place with a non-triggering event. You with me so far?
Yes. I already see where I messed up.
Okay. And now we then incorporate, once we do that, and we do it not just with people, we do it with everything, but non-triggering events, not just dogs, not just cars. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Now, step 5 is when we start incorporating cars and dogs, but at a distance he doesn't blow up at. And we practice that at 50 feet, then at 45 feet, and then 40 feet, and then 30 feet, until eventually we can get and break through that threshold. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's the way forward.
I was missing 2 and 3.
Cool. Well, let's crush it.
And I didn't know management was okay to live in management.
So living in management is not ideal.
now.
Yes,
No,
temporarily.
no.
Temporarily.
While we're working on
Yeah.
heel.
So Larry Crone is a pretty famous trainer in the United States, and he says all the time, when you're dealing with a reactive dog, a dog that's reactive on the leash, on a walk, his first question that he asks owners is, why do you walk your dog? And inevitably they're like, well, I mean, some of them are like, well, I guess that's a trick question. I don't know why. I mean, I thought I was supposed to. But inevitably it's like, well, it's for exercise, or it's because of this, or it's because the dog likes it, or because right. But can you achieve any of those things another way? And if so, if you can give your dog exercise, if you can give your dog enjoyment and outside time and all of these things, can you do those things temporarily, still enriching the dog's life, but not putting them in a position where they continually reinforce the behavior you don't want?
Right.
So start with that. Then you build up. And then eventually, then you can reintroduce those triggers. Great question, though.
Yeah.
I hope that explanation made sense. And
Yes,
when this comes out, you can listen back to the you can listen to it again. If I and maybe I said it wrong, maybe I messed it up, I'm happy to clarify later.
No, that was good. I totally could see where I was not doing the best job.
We're all just trying to do our best.
Right. We're all learning.
Right. I learn new stuff all the time.
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump into listener projects. Body language awareness. That's our first project. Take your dog on a controlled walk in a moderate distraction area, but not something that just makes them blow up. Your focus here is observation. I want you to watch the dogs. Watch the dog's ears. Watch the dog's eyes, their mouth, their posture, their pace change, the breathing rate. And I want you to try to keep some notes. Go on the app. It's free. Go in there, put in a log on what you notice. The moment you see fixation begin, mark it in your mind and then create distance. Don't wait for the escalation. Don't wait for that phase 2 that we were talking about. Just nip it in the bud early and practice that. Write down what you saw. Keep track of what you saw. Not only will the app give you like insights in exactly what to do next, but also it's just for you to refer back to and be like, yeah, those are my dog's like tells. Those are his or her body postures that they always do. That's how you learn your dog, by keeping track of it. And then track how early you can identify the behavior compared to your normal timing. So you can kind of keep track of like how quick you're getting and if you're getting better. All right, project number 2, early intervention. Set up a walk where you're going to encounter some mild distractions, but at a manageable distance. As soon as your dog begins to lock onto a trigger, just give him a calm no. I guess that wasn't really calm. It was kind of, but calm, not emotional. I think that's a better way of saying it, right? Because if you're just like, no, your dog's going to be like, don't care.
Yeah.
So you do want it to be firm, but you don't want it to be emotionally laced. Just give the dog a solid no. If the dog continues, that's when we apply a correction, either through the leash, an inside turn, stepping in front of them, reversing your direction. You've got a lot of options here. Then, the moment your dog disengages, mark it with good, and then keep walking. And then repeat that process. Really focus on your consistency. Focus on your timing and learn the timing piece, right? Mm-hmm. And don't worry about like the intensity, worry about consistency. All right. So that's my advice.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We got just over an hour. We almost made it, but I feel really good that we were able to kind of like talk through that process in action and with a real life example. I think that was, that's really good. So once again, our new email is going to be team@thepawprintacademy.com. And if you've got questions, comments, concerns, or you want to be an early beta tester for our app, I mean, honestly, our app is live. It's out there. You can use it. There's a chance there's going to be a bug or two. But if you want to be one of the testers for some of the premium or other features that we've got built into there, send me an email. I'll get you linked up. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in tonight. I can't think of anything else, so say good night.
Good night.